do you make of this 4B movement? The women that are shaving their heads, the women that are, quote, withholding sex, the women that are threatening to divorce their husbands and stockpiling abortion pills.
They're psychotic, frankly, but they're not real women in that way, in my mind, I guess. They're not desirable women. I guess I'm going to try to speak for most red-blooded American men like yourself. At the end of the day, I do think, and I'm not trying to be mean or insensitive, but I do think that Trump derangement syndrome has just gone off the cliff here. And there is something wrong upstairs, in my mind, for so many of these women who are reacting that way.
That was Sage Steele, a former host over at ESPN, who is now trying her hand at political commentary. So far, it's not really going well, but I guess that depends on who you ask. In a recent appearance on Sean Hannity's show on Fox News, Steele said that women who are withholding dating, sex, marriage, and children from the men in their lives who are Trump supporters are not only psychotic, but they are undesirable and not real women. But if they're undesirable, then who cares? The men won't want them anyway, and their crusade will be a bust, right? We'll talk about the 4B movement that Hannity brought up, but let's hear the rest of what Steele had to say.
The scary thing is that I think a lot of them are smart, educated women who are choosing to believe these things. And that's why the Democrats have pushed it for so long, though, because it has proven to work. This is the first time, though, to the shock and dismay of the left, that it hasn't worked. And I look at some of the demographics from this past election, which is 3 weeks ago yesterday, hard to believe. I mean, 18 to 24-year-old women. I mean, didn't Trump win that demographic? So really, people have begun, sane women have begun to do their homework and not just go for the low-hanging fruit that the left throws out there at them.
Okay, so the 4B movement started in South Korea, and it's picking up steam in various places around the world, including the US. As I mentioned, women are withholding dating, sex, marriage, and children from men who support Trump or are otherwise misogynistic. And why shouldn't they be withholding these things from men who don't respect them anyway? Why would anyone, male or female, hang out with someone who doesn't respect them or think they have rights to things like their own bodies or healthcare or an independent income? A lot of women stopped dating Trump supporters long before there was a term for it, before there was a movement for them to be a part of. And if Trump supporters think these women aren't real women or aren't desirable, then I don't know why they care. These aren't the women they're looking for. Of course, it's all very Lessa Strata, and those women were actually successful in getting what they wanted by withholding sex from the men in their lives, so maybe that's what these Trumper men are actually afraid of. And they're already mad about women not wanting to date them. There was a huge uproar from conservative men when surveys found that men who identified as conservatives or Trump supporters weren't as successful in the dating field.
This list is crazy, and I want to fixate on the third spot there, the Joe Rogan podcast. Like millions of people around the world, I train by day, Joe Rogan podcast by night. Now, this probably doesn't mean anything to you, but for millions of people, I mean, Joe Rogan is the most listened to person, by my calculations, in the world. He has 3.5-hour-long podcasts. I recommend listening to them on 3.5 speed.
To cope, some men have just decided to hide their political leanings from the women they're dating instead of being upfront about any of it. In other words, they thought lying about these women, by omission maybe, about their fundamental beliefs about women and insulting the women by not allowing them to make informed decisions for themselves would endear these same women to them. And that's why they had to move over to their own conservative dating app. They needed a safe space to be away from these mean and undesirable women.
I just wanted to let John know that I got my sweatshirt from his dating website that says "Dump Your Liberal Boyfriend," and I'm going to be wearing it. And for all the single girls out there, I'm going to be wearing that and encouraging them to get on your website and find themselves a nice conservative man, because conservative men are more successful, classier. They pick up a bill, they open a door. So girls, dump your liberal boyfriend now.
And John will definitely be having you back on very soon to talk about the right stuff. Very curious about how that's doing.
I will level with y'all. There is a certain level of imposter syndrome that comes with doing a job like this. It's similar to working in any kind of creative field. On one hand, you have to acknowledge that you're not ever going to be at the level you would like to be. But on the other hand, you have to understand that you are objectively good enough to make a career out of it. It's a very confusing and constant push-pull. However, a big part of doing jobs like this one, as is the case in many, many industries, especially these days, is getting the exposure you need from someone who has some kind of booking or platforming authority to notice you. Sage Steele, from her time working with ESPN, had that exposure, but she actually left ESPN on not great terms. She outed herself as a female misogynist on the sports network, making controversial comments about female sports reporters. She also spoke disparagingly about vaccine mandates, and she questioned how Black Barack Obama really is. She was ultimately removed from the network after her comments sparked backlash from the audience. She apologized for making the comments, but then she sued and settled with ESPN over their alleged violation of her First Amendment rights. Now she's tapped into the conservative network, rebranded herself, and landed herself a spot on Fox News. And good for her, she put in the work and she ended up somewhere that is now more in line with her own personal ideals and values. And we all know that Fox News loves a token. Fox News is, for right-wing media, the pinnacle of it. If I was an ambitious right-wing political pundit, if I got a spot on Fox News, I would probably be very happy about it. But Sage Steele has her work cut out for her. She's back on television and she has to make a new name for herself, throwing herself into a different beat than the one that she's built her career off of. Maybe she was chasing a viral moment to help kickstart her new career. And what better way to go viral than to insult your own demographic? It's so edgy, right? I mean, I'm talking about it, aren't I? But if her past comments on ESPN are any indicator, this is who she is, and these are the things she believes. And we over here on the left can act incredulous about all of it, but the truth of the matter is that there are plenty of conservative women who believe in things like traditional gender roles, for example. I personally don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If it works for you and your family, then fine. But choosing to live that way and choosing to raise your family that way is still a choice that you get to make. And that is no different from what the women partaking in the 4B movement are doing for themselves.
Can someone track down the women Kamala Harris says are bleeding out in park?
Present. I'm right here. I had a 19-day miscarriage in Idaho because of the abortion regulations. I was turned away not from one ER, but 2 ERs. Technically 3, because I walked into one and they said they wouldn't help me and I had to walk out. On day 8, I went to the 3rd official ER that I got checked into, and I never did receive a DNC. They gave me 1 dose of pain medicine in 19 days. I continued to suffer exponentially for the next 11 days.
That was John McEntee. You may have seen his videos on TikTok or Instagram, or maybe you've seen Walter Matherson spoof his videos, but he's always sitting, usually eating. In this video, it looks like he's eating a kid's meal of chicken nuggets. And then he always presents some very conservative talking point or a criticism of a liberal or progressive talking point in a succinct, snarky way, as if he's just wondering about things and shrugging. It's a perfect format for short-form political content, the kind of content where you don't want your audience to think too hard about what they just watched. You don't want to discuss or explain your point at all. You just want to plant seeds in their minds, maybe enrage them to the point of actually engaging with your content. You just want to make them feel like their half-baked beliefs are fully cooked and set. But McEntee isn't just a social media influencer. He's well established on the right as a Project 2025 staffer, and he was the director of White House personnel in the Trump administration.
He was literally the man closest to the president, Johnny McEntee, President Trump's personal assistant, his body man, abruptly forced out of his post and escorted off the White House grounds Monday. NBC News confirming McEntee is under investigation by the Secret Service for serious financial crimes.
According to the Wall Street Journal, McEntee was a habitual gambler, betting tens of thousands of dollars at a time, and was deemed a security risk as a result. Then Chief of Staff to the President, John Kelly, effectively had him tossed off the White House premises. We should note he was not ever charged with a crime. But in spite of it all, McEntee is nothing if not loyal to Donald Trump. Former college football player and Fox News production assistant, was such a strong believer in Trump's message that back in 2015, he repeatedly cold emailed the Trump campaign begging for a job before the campaign eventually brought him on as a volunteer and then as a paid staffer. McEntee was so committed to the cause that he worked out of this space in Trump Tower, 3 walls and an unfinished floor.
He, like vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance, is backed by tech billionaire Peter Thiel, and he founded a Trumpy right-wing dating app called Date Right Stuff. I hate that name, by the way. I think it's clunky, and I think that maybe he could have done better. So in the video you just saw, McGuinty insinuated that women in this country are not actually suffering as much from abortion bans as Democrats, specifically Kamala Harris, keep saying they are. He acts as though just because he doesn't know anyone who's experienced the negative side of these red state abortion bans, they're probably not real. At least he wants his audience to believe that they're not real. Unfortunately for him, his video went viral, so the women that he was asking about, they made themselves known, either by posting video responses of their own horrifying stories or detailing their stories in the comments. Here are just a few of the responses. One woman said, "My water suddenly broke and I went to the ER. They sent me home. Started cramping and went back to the ER. I miscarried at 17 weeks in the restroom at the ER because I wasn't deemed an emergency." So it doesn't sound like she was trying to kill her baby. Another woman said, "I was told when I had a possible ectopic pregnancy that I would have to wait until it made me septic to get the surgery to save my life." That is solid medical advice right there. Wait until you're nearly dead and then we'll do our best to reverse course. And one more, "Had a cyst burst inside my uterus while pregnant, causing a miscarriage. The on-call doc said it's best to wait a week to see if it comes out naturally. Now I can have 0 children because my uterus is gone." That was a preventable outcome, and again, this is coming from a woman who wanted to have children, and now she can't. Meanwhile, Republicans can't seem to stop criticizing women for being childless. And personally, I don't have his story because I will be 36 years old this October. I'm getting married a few weeks later in November, and I'm too scared to get pregnant in this big, stupid state. Because as healthy as I think I am, and as much as I've never wanted to abort a baby, you just have no idea what will happen once you get pregnant. You can only plan ahead so much, and every woman knows that, or they should know that. Before I wrap this video, I want to speak very quickly about McGuinty's word choice in the video. As I alluded to just now, I live in a red state, I live in Texas, so when he started off with, "Can someone track down the women?" my first thought went to what my state's Attorney General, Ken Paxton, is trying to do to women here in Texas. If you haven't put it together yet, he wants to track women. Specifically, he wants to violate our rights further to medical privacy by accessing the medical records of women who travel out of state to receive reproductive care. And here in Texas, traveling for hundreds of miles out of the regressive deep south just to get to a state that will actually take care of pregnant women is the only hope some women have of either having a healthy pregnancy or accessing life-saving abortive care. The doctors here in Texas can't help even if they wanted to. If they did and got caught, they can lose their license to practice medicine and they could be facing a lifetime prison sentence. Paxton is suing the Biden administration for the right to sidestep rules protecting medical privacy where it pertains to Texas women seeking abortions in other states where it is legal. For the Republicans, they constantly insist that their stances on abortion and women's reproductive health are a matter of states' rights and not a matter of religious, dogmatic zealotry, and certainly not a means of controlling and suppressing half of the population. When the Republican state leaders start worrying about what's going on in other states, that seems to be going a little bit beyond states' rights. It seems incongruent with their primary argument, but Paxton claims that the federal rule protecting medical privacy is actually the federal government interfering in the state government's ability to prosecute criminal behavior, even though the so-called criminal behavior of protecting one's own life would be happening out of state, therefore out of the state's jurisdiction. Now, just to be clear, he wants permission to violate HIPAA on political grounds. He wants to claim that he's acting on behalf of criminality, but it's only a crime because he called it a crime.